Good afternoon. As I mentioned, we had a Queensland Disaster Management Committee meeting this morning, and we've just had a further weather update with Laura from the Bureau. Tropical Cyclone Jasper remains a few hundred kilometres east of Cairns. It's now been upgraded to a Category 2 system. It's possible that it will increase in intensity between now and when it makes landfall between Cooktown and Innisfail tomorrow. Tropical cyclone warning is current between Cape Flattery and Townsville, including Cairns, Palm Island and the Atherton Tablelands. So we say to people in all of those regions, that includes Cairns, Townsville, Innisfail, Mareeba, Hopevale, Wudjil, Yarrabah, Cassowary Coast, Tablelands, Charters Towers, Hinchinbrook, Palm Island and Douglas. If you live in any of those regions, you need to be ready for a cyclone to cross the coast sometime tomorrow. Destructive wind gusts of up to 140 kilometres per hour are forecast. We are also expecting very heavy rainfall, which will cause life-threatening flash flooding. And so, as we always say, if it's flooded, do not cross it. If it's flooded, forget it. All of our authorities are well prepared. We have been assured by all of them that all of the preparations we can do, all of the people we can have in place ready, all of the evacuation centres are ready to go. In fact, there's 6 people in evacuation centres now. The State Disaster Coordination Centre is stood up and active, and I'll get Laura from the Bureau to tell you some more.
Good afternoon. Over the last few hours, we have seen Tropical Cyclone Jasper strengthen, and it is now a Category 2 system. So as of 2 p.m, it's located 235 kilometres east-northeast from Cairns. So the most likely scenario that we have is this system crossing as a Category 2 system near Port Douglas at around 1 p.m. tomorrow. There are a small range of scenarios around the exact time of crossing. However, the most likely scenario is that it will cross around that 1 p.m. time period, and more certainty of exactly this timing will come into light in the coming evenings and as we go into this evening. So we're really encouraging people in those communities to stay up to date. We are issuing these track maps every 3 hours. It's not just all about that crossing though. We can see gale force winds before this system crosses the coast. So these gale winds could eventuate from as early as this evening for those communities in that warning zone. So there is a chance that they could happen overnight and into the early hours of the morning, and some members of those communities waking up tomorrow morning with gale force winds already happening in that community. We are expected to see destructive winds of up to 140 kilometres per hour with this system, and they will continue to strengthen as Jasper approaches the coast. A Category 2 system typically sees enough wind to bring up and pull down large trees and also move around large objects that have not been secured. It's important to note too that gale force winds aren't just gusts of winds that happen occasionally, but they can be consistent and sustained winds, so very strong winds occurring at a very consistent rate. Therefore, we've got our warning zone issued, so that's gales within the next 24 hours, and that's Cape Flattery to Lucinda, and we've got that watch zone as well, so that's expecting impacts within that 24 to 48 hours, and that's Cape Melville to Cape Flattery and some inland areas. Those in the watch zone, it's important to note that over the coming hours we could move that watch into a warning as that cyclone approaches the coast. It's not just about that wind, however, we are expecting to see flooding impacts and a lot of rainfall from this system as well. So we could see storm tide impacts as we see Tropical Cyclone Jasper approaching that coast. So the areas vulnerable to storm tide are really those low-lying areas that are along the coast, and that's expected to occur with the crossing, so at some stage late morning, early afternoon tomorrow. We also have large amounts of rainfall associated with this system. So our warning now includes intense rainfall, which may lead to dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding. Flash flooding can occur when we see large amounts of rainfall occurring in a short period of time. So we are likely to see with this system within a 6-hourly period rainfall of up to 250 to 300 millimetres. We could also see up to 500 millimetres occurring within a 24-hour period for those areas in that watch and warning zone. In addition to flash flooding, these large amounts of rainfall can also cause riverine flooding. So we do have a flood watch current for large parts of North Queensland, and the Bureau will be issuing flood warnings as we see that flooding occurring for the riverine flooding in those areas. So we're really just encouraging people to stay up to date with all of our cyclone watches warnings and our flood warnings as well, and to do that via the Bureau website and the Bureau app as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As I spoke about this yesterday, the 40 staff that we were sending up have now been deployed to assist with general duties, our vulnerable communities, and obviously staffing our evacuation centres, also to increase the patrols into those affected areas. I did want to speak candidly about the dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding that we know is going to occur as a result of this system. So as was mentioned a number of times and will be continued to be mentioned today, if it's flooded, forget it. Never drive or walk into these flooded areas. There are many people on beaches, on holidays. New people have moved into the area. Please listen to the warnings and listen to authorities. Sadly, we get up here and have this conversation when there's flooding and cyclones. And for some reason, someone always drives through those flooded areas. Please do not be on those roads unless you really have to be. Once again, if it's flooded, forget it. It is dangerous and life-threatening flash floods that we're expecting after this system. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. And whilst this is an unusual time of year to be facing a cyclone of this kind, there is nothing unusual about our response. We have amongst the most experienced natural disaster response capability in the world. Outstanding first responders, volunteers, emergency service personnel, leadership that contributes to the positive outcomes for community safety. So there's a message for people in far North Queensland today, and that is things are going to get a little bit rough over the next 12 to 24 hours. Don't be out on the water, it's going to be rough. Watch that storm surge, be prepared for the heavy rain and the flash flooding and also those gale force winds. You've got the best team here to support you. They will be available to assist you should the worst happen. But you need to listen to the warnings. You need to be prepared yourself. Now is the time to act. Listen to the authorities. The storm is on its way. Be prepared. Keep safe.
Yes, good afternoon. As we've heard, Tropical Cyclone Jasper is a Category 2 system, and it is expected to cross tomorrow sometime around lunchtime as a Category 2 system. Today we started to see some wind and rain in around the affected areas, particularly around Cairns. We know that over the next 36 hours this will intensify as the cyclone comes closer and crosses the coast. We are expecting significant rainfall, as we've heard from the Bureau, flash flooding and dangerous winds. There are a lot of new people in the area up around Cairns, and I know our disaster groups and our messaging has been engaging with those people. Can I ask everyone in the Cairns area, from basically Cape Melville to Townsville, to stay connected with our messaging, in particular over the next 36 hours. This morning we issued a preemptive disaster declaration for the Cairns, Innisfail and Mareeba areas, which covers Cape Melville to Townsville and up on the Atherton Tablelands. This disaster declaration was put in place to ensure that our emergency responders have the support and legislative powers to be able to respond to the community and keep the community safe. Significant preparation has been underway, particularly around the low-lying areas where we've been sandbagging for tidal surge, particularly around our critical infrastructure like the Cairns Hospital and other businesses in those areas. All essential services have been engaged, including our power, our communication providers, and they are ready to respond as soon as it's safe to do so. The Cairns Local Disaster Management Group has opened 2 evacuation centres, one at Edmonton and one at Redlanch, and today we've already seen 6 people take up that, and the message there is if you feel that you need to evacuate your home due to the high winds or flooding, please stay in contact with the local messaging and head to one of those evacuation centres. Both those evacuation centres give a combined capacity of over 2,500 people. As the State Disaster Coordinator, as the Minister said, I'm very confident with the high level of planning and assurance that I've been given that the system is in place, ready to respond. We've pre-positioned our resources, and now is the time to move from preparation to response. Now is the time from this afternoon on to limit your travel on the roads. It's time to stay indoors and shelter in place. As always, if you need assistance, dial 000 if it's life-threatening, or if it's non-life-threatening, call Police Link on 131 444 or our State Emergency Service on 132 500. Thank you.
I wanted to take the opportunity to provide some updates in relation to the power system. Given the likely intensity of the rainfall coupled with the predicted storm tide surges, we will start to proactively de-energise low-lying areas of the impact zone. That means that residents in built-up areas around CBDs, in particular in Cairns and further north, could expect power to start being removed from the system later this evening and overnight. This is a preventative measure that is done to prevent damage to the systems. De-energising those systems tonight and into the early hours of tomorrow means that we can restore them within a matter of hours as the storm has passed, as opposed to allowing that damage to occur, which could take literally weeks to rectify. So this means we're able to get the power on much more quickly, and we've been practicing that arrangement since 2011. We do also expect that there'll be some impact to the power network, of course, due to the high winds and flying debris. We all know how that can impact on power lines. I do also want to talk about some changes that residents will have seen in their communities over recent years, and that has been the uptake of rooftop solar. There's around 30,000 households in the forecast impact zone that now have rooftop solar, and it's important to understand how to manage that rooftop solar as the cyclone approaches. Now is the best time to switch off your rooftop solar. We urge residents that have rooftop solar to go now to the Ergon website and seek appropriate information about how to do that safely. If your system has already been impacted by heavy rain or flooding, for example, your inverter is underwater, our message is simple: do not touch it. If your system becomes impacted from high winds during the event of the cyclone crossing the coast, do not touch your inverter or any other parts of your electrical system. Leave that for a licensed electrician. We are well practiced, as we've heard from other speakers this afternoon, in responding to these sorts of scenarios, and there will be resources made available to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Fire and Emergency Services has been using the last 24 hours to put in place its last readiness steps as this system approaches the coast. So additional specialist resources from a swiftwater rescue point of view, from a damage assessment point of view, and from a storm and working at heights have been put in place from our State Emergency Service and our Fire and Rescue Service. Can I please also thank the community for their preparation efforts that has occurred over the last period of time. It helps us do our job, and I encourage that vigilance to be carried forward into the crossing. So now's the time to have a plan for how to deal with the crossing and how to spend that time, hunker down, have a plan, make sure that you do the last minute preparation to make sure that you're self-sufficient for the next 72 hours. It will be important. This is life-threatening situations will be put in place if people do not heed the warnings that are provided by authorities. So I encourage everyone to stay informed, heed warnings as they come out and public messaging as it comes out, and make sure that in terms of people's decision making, that they consider not just their own safety and those around them, but the responders that will be put, their lives will be put at risk if in those situations as they occur. So I greatly appreciate the community's efforts to this point in time and look forward to their continued support for our operations. Thank you very much.
The reason we're all here today, the reason all of these leaders are speaking here today is to impart some fundamentally important information and advice to Queenslanders, particularly those Queenslanders in the far north of our state. When a cyclone crosses the Queensland coast, our greatest concern often relates to destructive wind gusts. You've heard today there will be gale force winds, there will be wind gusts up to 140 kilometres an hour in the strike zone for the cyclone. In this case, there will be very heavy rainfall as well. As you've heard from the Bureau of Meteorology, there will be between 250 millimetres and 300 millimetres of rain in a 6-hour period. That's been described by the Bureau as a life-threatening deluge. That means lives are at risk if precautions and actions are not taken in advance of that rain. And when the rain comes, Queenslanders need to be prepared. To put that in context, when we had a severe weather event in Brisbane and in early 2022, there was 500 millimetres of rain that struck the capital, and that caused severe flooding. So Queenslanders in the far north of our state need to be prepared, but as you've heard from the leaders here today, we have the best disaster management, preparation and response system in the world in Queensland. All of those mechanisms are now swinging into place. We are here to support Queenslanders, but the messages today are very important, should be taken seriously, but most importantly, with that heavy rainfall that's coming, if it's flooded, forget it.
Any questions?
Just in terms of those maximum rainfall totals, I know that some isolated spots will see 400 to 500 millimetres. Are we expecting that where the cyclone Jasper makes landfall? Which of those areas are at highest risk?
So the highest risk is around that warning area. That's where we are seeing those very intense amounts of rainfall. But it's important to note that with cyclones, we can see large rain bands quite far from the centre of the cyclone. So we did see in a 20-hour period near Mackay earlier yesterday, 230 odd millimetres in a 20-hour period. So we're already seeing those quite high totals, and it doesn't need to be close to that cyclone core. That's where we're most likely to see the most intense rainfall, but it really is a large area. So if we do see rainfall outside of that warning zone, we will be issuing additional severe weather warnings to warn for that flash flooding risk, or flood warnings depending on if it's a flash flood or a riverine flooding risk.
And could you just explain if there's a percentage of likelihood that it will hover as it slowly moves across land? I know people are worried about that rain band being slow.
So the rain band or the cyclone?
Or the cyclone, and I guess the rain that follows with it as well, to spread further.
Yeah. So in terms of the movement, once this cyclone reaches land, it is expected to continue moving westwards, so towards the Gulf of Carpentaria, and it will weaken. So we will see that wind strength decrease in intensity. However, the rainfall associated with this will still linger while that system is a tropical low. So we could expect to see rainfall over the coming days, long after we've seen those wind numbers decrease.
Evacuations, perhaps for the Deputy Commissioner. 6 people doesn't sound like a lot of people in evacuation centres so far. Are you satisfied with that number? Would you like to have seen more people leave their homes now?
No, I'm very satisfied with that number. We opened those evacuation centres in Cairns at 10:30 this morning, and we've been doing local messaging with the residents, and this is part of your emergency care plan. If you've got a plan in place and you're comfortable in your residence and you're comfortable that you are safe and secure there, it's probably one of the safest spaces to be. but those evacuation centres are open for those tourists in the area that may not have somewhere to live, somewhere in our caravan parks up in that area, but also for those residents in that low-lying area that could be impacted by our storm surge. So as the cyclone approaches, we will see that heavy rainfall that the Bureau has indicated. We will see increased winds. What we do ask people to be aware of, but if you're in one of those areas of risk, is to make that decision to go to the evacuation centre timely, knowing that during the hours of darkness tonight, we will see destructive winds form and we will see heavy rainfall. So make a good timely decision on when to go to the evacuation centre so that you don't put yourself at further risk.
Are we likely to see evacuations in the Daintree or coastal relation?
Well, the area of warning, as Laura's pointed out, is from Cape Melville down. Now, we have evacuation centres available in all of our communities, right down from Cooktown, Wudjil, Port Douglas, Cairns, Yarrabah, and we've continued our planning right down to Townsville, and in fact as late as today, knowing that the system may move further across land to the Gulf. Our district disaster coordinators have already engaged all of those remote communities in the Gulf and Cape area just for their preparedness as well. So again, it'll depend on the conditions. We know that we've got some older housing in those areas, and that's why we have those evacuation centres available. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.